Well, joining me now from Victoria is a minister who's been very busy during the COVID crisis. Both childcare and higher education and everything in between. Minister Dan Tehan. Dan, welcome to Watercooler.
Pleasure to be with you, Nick, and great to see you.
Dan, you made some announcements on childcare today. Tell me what you've announced.
Look, importantly, the measures that we've put in place up until this stage has kept 99% of the sector open and been able to provide that child care and education for young Australians, but most importantly, to ensure that anyone going to work who needs to can get care for their children while they're going off to work. Now, obviously, with this second Victorian wave, we've had to look at other measures because what the Victorian state government has done is basically require parents to stay at home and to keep their children at home. And this means that they can't access childcare. So we've had to put in place some provisions to support parents, and we've done that by giving them 30 days allowable absences. So they've got 30 days that they can keep their children at home, and that's on an additional 42 that they get each year. So they can keep their children at home and then the centre can waive the gap. So basically will cost parents nothing to have their parents at home, and it means they can keep their enrolment. So once we get through these 6 weeks, hopefully we'll have put, obviously flatten the curve when it comes to the pandemic, and parents will be able to get back to work and they'll be able to get their kids back into childcare so they can go off to work. It's an incredibly important economic measure for us from a federal government point of view, because we know if we're going to get the economy to rebound strongly out of COVID-19, parents have to be able to get access to childcare so they can work, and that's why we've put so much time and effort into it.
But how long can we go on doing this? I mean, at some point, where is the end point with helping out childcare?
Well, we hope here in Victoria, and especially for those in Melbourne, that this will be 6 weeks and 6 weeks only, and then we'll start to see real change in the activity of the coronavirus in the community, in that community transmission. And that's what we're all working towards. Obviously, for the rest of the country, what we're able to do to get the childcare sector through the pandemic, we're now seeing, obviously, people going back to work. We're seeing demand come back into the sector, and it's really helping to drive economic activity. So what we've done everywhere else has worked. Now, what we've got to hope is that this will only last for 6 months, these stage 4 restrictions in Melbourne, and then once again we'll be able to support people as they go back to work. But we've got to provide this assistance at this time because the economic recovery out of Melbourne and Victoria is going to be so important to our nation going forward. From a federal government point of view, we have to be there to help key drivers of that economic recovery.
Dan, there's probably never been an education minister before you who's been responsible for an export industry earning as much as $30 billion. That's the universities. They are in all sorts of trouble over this, aren't they?
It is a big problem. 250,000 Australian jobs are created by the international student market, and it's 40 billion of national income is generated from it. And obviously, it's been a very important source of income for our university. So incredibly challenging times for the higher education sector. So we've done 2 things. The first is we can never lose sight of what our university's number 1 priority should be, and that's to educate Australian students. And so what we've done is we've put the focus through a reform package to make sure that we can increase the number of places for Australian students at university next year. We think that we need about an additional 20,000 places in the system, and so our reform package is designed to do that, and it will provide 100,000 extra places over the coming years. So we've really put that focus on making sure our universities are there, in particular for young Australians, but also for those Australians who might have to transition employment. And then when it comes to international students, we're ready to go with some pilots. but obviously that's dependent on hotel quarantine arrangements being, completely secure. State and territory governments wanting to ensure that they will take responsibility for those quarantine arrangements, and obviously making sure that we've got the spread of the virus completely under control in those states and territories. So that preparatory work has been done, but it'll be ultimately up to state and territories to decide whether they're in a position to begin those pilots. So it is a challenging time for our higher education sector. What has happened is also that international student revenue has helped research in this country, very important research, especially in the medical side of things, and also when it comes to science, engineering. So we've got to make sure also that we're able to do what we can to keep that very important research infrastructure, research know-how that we've got in this nation as well. And we're working with the sector on that at the moment.
But to some extent, and we had Greg Sheridan talking about this earlier, the universities have actually charted their own course to disaster in some respects by this relentless focus on overseas students, and particularly on Chinese students. Some group of 8 universities this year were due to have more than 30% of their new students would have been from mainland China. I mean, that's just a crazy way to operate, isn't it?
Yeah, we've been saying for a couple of years now how important it is was for our higher education sector to make sure they diversified, and also to make sure that the income that they were generating, that they were investing some of that income so that they, so they could have reserves in place if, for instance, one of those markets fell over. So, and look, some universities, to their credits, did put in place contingency reserves so that they knew if something did happen to a particular market, that they would be in a position where they were able to deal with it. But I think, COVID-19 has taught us very clearly that we have to be now prepared for all contingencies, that we can't put too many eggs in the one basket.
Dan, I think a lot of us were encouraged by your thoughts on free speech and academic freedom at university, which of course is under threat. 2 very prominent cases in Queensland right now. But we're going to have to do more, aren't we, if we're going to actually achieve what we want, which is a truly liberal education and true freedom of speech on campus.
I couldn't agree more. Freedom of speech, freedom of academic inquiry go to the heart of our democracy, goes to the heart of who we are as a nation, and absolutely fundamental to our higher education sector. And that's why I commissioned Robert French, the former Chief Justice of the High Court, to put in place and develop a code which should be adopted by all universities. Now, all universities have said that they will adopt that code and have it up and running by the end of the year. Obviously, there has been recent developments, and look, I'm watching this area incredibly closely. I want to make sure that, given what we've seen over the last couple of months, that the code is still fit for purpose given developments, and I want to make sure that we continue to push hard on this, because it's absolutely vital for our higher education sector to be exemplars when it comes to protecting freedom of speech and freedom of academic inquiry. And this is something that, as a government, we will continue to push, and I'm hoping to say more on this in coming days.
You hear a lot of quite distressing stories at the moment about how students are coping in schools. Year 12 in particular. I mean, Year 12 is always a stressful year, even in the good times, but the stories one hears of students with their whole final year disrupted, and they think their whole future hangs on this final year. What can we do to help them and their parents, of course?
Well, I think in the first instance, we've just got to be there for those Year 12 students in particular, and make sure that we're supporting them, we're engaging with them. We're letting them know that these are the most challenging times that this nation has faced since the Second World War. That they, it's a great test of their resilience and their fortitude. But if they can continue to focus on their learning and on their education this year, and they can do that with everything that's been thrown at them, that's going to stand them in really good stead for their future. And although a lot of their dreams of what Year 12 would look like has been taken away from them, if they get through it, in my view, it's just going to be the making of them. And we need that current generation. They're going to be the ones who are at the forefront of helping us repair and recover from this pandemic. So I think we've just got to be there with them, make sure they understand what's happening, and challenges like this have been faced by this nation before, and really that they will be part of the future of how we get ourselves out of this, and therefore focusing on their learning and making sure they're getting those outcomes that they want to get is just so important.
Dan, finally, you're based in Victoria, country Victoria. You're right in the heart of this, in the middle of these heavy lockdown measures. At what stage do we actually say, you know, the cure is worse than the disease, that we are doing so much damage to our businesses and to people's lives, to their jobs, that the cost and the benefit are way out of whack?
These are incredibly difficult times, and you're right. These are going to have big impacts, both economic and health-wise, on the Victorian population. From a federal government point of view, really our role at the moment is to be there to help and support Victorians as best we can through these next 6 weeks, and that's very much been the Prime Minister's approach, has been we just have to be there to support Victorians at this time. Now, I think one of the most incredibly important things that we're going to have to do as we get ourselves through this is to be able to look back and understand what are the things we got right and what are the things we didn't get right. What was proportional, what was targeted, what wasn't proportional and what wasn't targeted, and how can we do things better in the future. And we've really got to learn as we go along, because unless we get a vaccine, we are likely to be dealing with outbreaks, hopefully a lot smaller than what we've seen in Victoria, but over the coming months and at least maybe the next year. So you're absolutely right. We've got to be assessing, we've got to be evaluating as we're going along to make sure that what we're doing, we're targeting and is proportionate to how best we can deal with this. But at the moment in Victoria, given the community transmission in particular, we just have to drive that community transmission down. And then I think what we've got to do is get back to that more proportionate and targeted approach. Thanks, Nick. It's a pleasure to be with you. And can I just give a shout out for the Menzies Research Centre for the outstanding work you do. Thanks for holding up the important traditions which the Liberal Party is built on. And it's fantastic work that you do. And I look forward to engaging with you into the future.